Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a fascinating look into the life of Dee, a banking professional who's now based in New York. We've gathered quite a bit of material, her own reflections, stories that give us a really unique view on how she navigated some huge life decisions.
Right. And our goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is really to trace Dee's path. It's quite unique from, handling the crazy pressure of the Chinese education system to actively seeking out what she calls a laid-back career here in the U.S. We'll be digging into those key moments, where choice, maybe chance, and just adapting really shaped her life.
Yeah, and I think this dive is going to uncover some maybe surprising things, insights into dealing with that kind of intense academic pressure, and also the unexpected ways life can shift, like just following a friend's advice, and what it actually means to feel content with your job. Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's unpack Dee's experience with the Gaokao first. That's China's huge national college entrance exam. We hear a lot about how intense it is, but what did our sources tell us about Dee's specific personal struggle with it and how it turned out? Well, her experience sounds pretty profound, actually. She described high school as especially tough.
Hmm.
And she was quite open about, not being naturally gifted at exams and getting really nervous, which obviously just made it harder.
And that pressure seems to have shown up physically too, right? What really stood out for me was that she actually got sick, diarrhea, and gastroenteritis on the day of her Chinese language exam. Said her vision felt a little shaky. I mean, can you even imagine trying to perform under that kind of stress?
Yeah, she put it down to discomfort or just extreme tension. It's a powerful example, though, isn't it, of the kind of psychological and physical toll these high-stakes exams can have, especially in systems where just so much rides on one result. But despite all that, she ended up feeling lucky to get into XX University.
That feeling she described of lacking control is really striking. She said, and this is a direct quote, "At that time, there was no choice. You just had to work hard. You just had to study hard for the exam. Many things were not up to you to choose." She even mentioned that you didn't know your exam scores before picking your major. So what does that tell you about the kind of environment she grew up in, and how might that have shaped her thinking about big life decisions later on?
Well, it definitely points to a system where maybe individual choice felt really limited. It fosters that mindset of, work hard, hope it works out, rather than actively choosing your path. You can see how that might lead to a more accepting, maybe even a slightly fatalistic view later. For you listening, it makes you wonder, right? How does that early experience shape how someone approaches choices later, even when they supposedly have more freedom?
Okay, so after navigating the Gaokao, Dee gets into XX University. But her university start sounds, well, pretty unique. She was among the very first students at Guangzhou University town back in 2004. And her descriptions of arriving there give us a real sense of having to adapt quickly.
Oh, yeah. She recalled arriving and just seeing yellow mud everywhere. Buildings were still going up. She even mentioned flies in the cafeteria. Described it all as feeling particularly backward initially. Sounds like a pretty challenging start, to put it mildly.
And her major, information management, information systems. That wasn't her first plan either. She initially wanted to do medicine in her home province, had picked chemistry for it, but then a friend really pushed information management, that mix of tech and business. And she went with it, even though her parents wanted medicine. Later, she actually said it was lucky she didn't get into med school. It seems like maybe a chance decision, but perhaps it showed an early leaning away from the most intense paths.
Could be. And despite those, let's say, rough initial conditions on campus, she formed really strong friendships. Her classmates were incredibly diverse students from Tibet, different ethnic minorities, different economic backgrounds. And she pointed out there were very few women, maybe a dozen out of 80 or 90 students, which meant the women in the dorms became incredibly close.
Right. And there's a key insight she shared about those peers. She noticed some classmates, even those facing real economic hardship working part-time, needing aid, were just exceptionally strong in learning, very hardworking, and many were very talented. Seeing that made her feel like, wow, I had to work hard to keep up.
Exactly. An experience like that, adapting to a totally new place, learning alongside people so diverse and driven, it really must shape how you see ambition, privilege. It makes you think, doesn't it? How even in tough circumstances, the people around you can be such a huge motivator. For you listening, think about it. How might being surrounded by that kind of determination change your own view of what effort and success mean?
So she found her footing at university, shifted her focus a bit, and then her next big move seems to have been sparked by something quite personal, something unexpected, linking back to a high school crush who'd gone abroad.
Yeah, it's interesting how these things happen. This personal connection apparently was what really motivated her to buckle down and study English for exams like TOEFL or IELTS. She developed this strong desire to study overseas, shows how sometimes personal ties can ignite global ambitions.
And she actually had offers from universities in Hong Kong initially, several of them. But she ended up choosing XX University instead. Though it's interesting, she did mention later feeling a little regret about not going to Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm. But then later on, she came to see going to the US for grad school again in information management as the more correct choice for her, after all. So, what changed? Why that shift and how she viewed it?
Well, her reasoning, based on what she shared, is pretty clear and really gets to her core priorities. She found Hong Kong just felt very high pressure, very tough. And she realized, she wasn't someone who could sustain that kind of intense energy all the time. She specifically said she preferred to be a bit more laid back and not always so tense.
Hmm.
So that initial regret about Hong Kong maybe helped clarify what she actually didn't want.
Right. And there was another factor she valued about the US too. She mentioned appreciating the gender equality and how career planning works for women here. She noted that in the US, being in your 30s or 40s and thinking about changing jobs, it doesn't make you feel old in the same way she felt it might elsewhere.
So it wasn't just about picking a place, was it? It was a very conscious decision to align her environment with her own energy levels, her personality, and her desire for long-term flexibility. And what that really means for you listening is maybe understanding your own tolerance for pressure and making that a priority can be just as important as chasing those traditional markers of success. Okay, so how did this preference for being laid back and wanting that flexibility actually play out in Dee's professional life?
Well, her career path has been, as she describes it, quite linear, pretty consistent. She stayed within banking, doing similar kinds of work, starting right out of grad school as a technology analyst at a bank.
Which is fascinating because she studied programming in both undergrad and grad school. But she stated very clearly she hasn't written a single line of code professionally, not one. However, she did stress that having that basic technology knowledge is really vital for the roles she's had. Things like project management, business analysis, and now compliance and operational risk. That last one, compliance, while important, often involves more process and oversight, maybe less of that high-pressure, always-on coding or sales environment. Seems to fit that preference.
And when she was asked if she thought her path was, particularly smooth, she was pretty honest, said no, not really. She admitted she'd thought about moving into the tech industry. Obviously, the packages were much better than banking, but ultimately she decided she was, in her words, a bit lazy.
That's pretty refreshing honesty, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sort of goes against the grain of always needing to push for the next big thing. She summed up her philosophy really well, and I'm quoting again here. I wasn't very dissatisfied with my job anyway, so that was it. I didn't have the perseverance to start over. Anyway, I didn't particularly dislike it. I felt it was all okay.
Yeah, that it was all okay idea. It's actually quite powerful. It really makes you question, what does success look like if it's not about constantly climbing the ladder or getting the biggest paycheck? It suggests that maybe contentment can just be found in stability, in a lack of dissatisfaction.
So as we sort of wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
if Dee could go back, use a time machine, what advice would she give her younger self, say back in high school or university?
Her answer was pretty surprising, actually. She just said no. She doubled down on her belief that back then there was no choice. You just had to work hard.
Yeah.
And she contrasted that with the U.S. system where, taking a year off, changing majors, switching schools, it's all much more feasible.
Right. She felt she was quite lucky, really,
Yeah.
just to end up in a good school given those circumstances. And she basically concluded, I don't have many other suggestions. I don't think
Yeah.
it's something you can control. It really underscores this deep sense of acceptance about what she felt was just outside her control.
Exactly. Dee's story is a fascinating look at how contentment doesn't always come from having unlimited choices. Sometimes, maybe often, it comes from accepting the external realities, the constraints, and then getting really good at finding what's good enough within them. It kind of redefines what agency means, doesn't it? For you listening, what really stands out to you about that balance Dee seems to strike between, her own actions and just accepting the things she felt she couldn't control?
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Dee's really unique and, I think, incredibly insightful journey. Her story definitely highlights how unpredictable life paths can be and how many different ways there are to define success and contentment.
Absolutely. And maybe the final thought here is that Dee's story suggests this laid-back approach. It isn't necessarily about slacking off or avoiding effort. Perhaps it's more about being strategic with your energy, finding genuine satisfaction in things being good enough, and recognizing where the limits of your own control lie in this really complex world. How might embracing that kind of perspective maybe shift your own approach to big life decisions or your career path? Something to think about.